Bet you all didn't know this. At least I didn't know that there's some certain GOP politicians who are trying to reintroduce the gold standard. Pretty awesome. Essentially, trying to reintroduce sound money. Now, I think they're going to run into some problems, not the least of which is nobody wants sound money in Washington. But I want to take a look at this article and point out what I think. Obviously, it won't pass, but logistically, they're going to face some problems. So let's take a look at this article here from Zero Hedge. 3 GOP reps introduce gold standard bill to stabilize the dollar value. So, right off the bat, you got to think to yourself, okay, $32 trillion in debt. Number one, if we go back on a gold standard with that much debt, what has to happen? Gold has to be revalued significantly. Significantly. I don't know by how much, but I'm talking $15,000, $30,000 an ounce, a lot, right? In order for that debt and the dollars or the gold we have in custody, whatever that amount is, we don't even know, as a federal government, actually backs up the dollars that are out there. So gold has to be revalued big time. Reading from the article here says, as America faces twin threats of inflation and bank failures, 3 U.S. congressmen introduced a pivotal sound money bill that would enable the Federal Reserve note or dollar to regain stable footing for the first time in more than a half century. The Gold Standard Restoration Act to facilitate the repegging of the volatile Federal Reserve note to a fixed weight of gold bullion. Got to go back to why they took us off the gold standard in the first place, which is it eliminated government. The French came to redeem, a lot of people came to redeem their gold. We didn't have it. At least we said we didn't have it. And we said, okay, sorry, no can do. Gold is now, or the dollar is now backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Further reading, upon passage of H.R. 2435, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve are given 24 months to publicly disclose all gold holdings. Wait a second. You don't know how much they hold? That's correct. We don't. So one might assume that there's some suspicious stuff going on if we don't know how much gold they have today, right? Maybe they have zero. Okay. Further reading. After which time the Federal Reserve note or the dollar would be formally repegged to the fixed weight of gold as its next market price. Federal Reserve notes would become fully redeemable for an exchange weight of gold at the new price. Okay. I'm going to continue reading, but a couple things that I'm thinking of right now. Let's say we had a magic wand back on the gold standard. Great. That means government can't, I guess they can deficit spend. They can still sell treasuries, but those people can redeem dollars for gold. That's an issue for our government. Why? Because we deficit spend at an increasingly alarming rate. And when we deficit spend and people can redeem that for gold and we don't have it, we're back off the gold standard. So when we have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and this year I think our deficit is going to be about $2 trillion, meaning we take in $2 trillion less than we do in taxes. How do we do that with a gold standard? The answer is we don't. Which is why I don't think there's any appetite for this in Washington. Because what a gold standard requires is you have the gold, which requires you to not spend if you don't have the gold. And it's just not popular in Washington. It's not popular because they would have to be honest with their voters that money doesn't grow on trees and they cannot print prosperity and productivity. Unfortunately, that is not something that Washington's too keen on. So what's the opposite side of this? More deficit spending, which should lead you to believe maybe you should buy things the government can't print. My humble opinion. All right, let's get back to the article. The gold standard would protect against Washington's irresponsible spending habits, which is why they wouldn't want it, and the creation of money out of thin air. says Rep. Mooney in a statement, prices would be shaped by economics rather than instincts of bureaucrats. Now, what I always say, and I said this in a video before, as Ayn Rand says, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Economics is reality. Math is reality. So when he says prices would be shaped by economics rather than instincts of bureaucrats, they don't want that. But economics and the instincts of bureaucrats is how they feel. It has nothing to do with math. Fine. But that has direct consequences on inflation, on your particular purchasing power, etc. So you have to think like well, you don't have to think like I do, but you have to think to yourself, what is Washington probably going to do? What has been their track record? It's to decrease your purchasing power by handing out more and more currency units and more deficit spending. And they don't want to operate in reality because they don't get votes by operating in reality. They get votes by pretending that reality doesn't exist. So, further reading. No longer would American families, businesses, and the economy as a whole be at the mercy of the Federal Reserve and the reckless Washington spenders. Love it. Hey, love the aspiration. Love that you're putting this forward. Love it all. That's why Washington doesn't want it, though. Further reading, the Federal Reserve note has lost more than 40% of its purchasing power since 2000. There comes a point where it's like minting a penny, which I think we're probably already there, costs more than the penny. You're getting into Banana Republic territory. I think it costs 17 cents to print a $100 bill. So I would imagine it costs the same to print a $1 bill. So it comes to this point where it's like the actual manufacturing, the mint, printing the currency costs more than the currency actually purchases, which is kind of funny, kind of not, but all right. Further reading, notably, Mooney's bill would also require full disclosure of all central banks and U.S. government gold holdings and gold-related financial transactions over the last 6 decades. Now, if this is your first time watching this channel or first time kind of hearing about this, you might think to yourself, like I do, why don't we know what those gold holdings are over the last 6 decades today without this bill passing? And that just goes to show you how secretive Washington is in this whole like, hey, we're just this big open book, and it's all this off-balance sheet trickery and financial engineering that goes on, including controlling the price of gold around the world. Why do they want to control the price of gold? Because if they take you off the gold standard as a country and gold starts rising, that's not good for them. Because what do people do? They leave the dollar and they go into gold. So they got to control the price. They got to suppress it. The gold standard has never failed America. Bad ideas and bad politicians did. If we do nothing, disaster awaits us, as it is, as it has drowned earlier civilizations that spent and inflated their way to ruin. Reed continued. Now, one thing that I always like to reiterate is I totally agree with that. Bad politicians, bad ideas. It wasn't the gold standard. But laws are just there. If they're selectively enforced, come out with a bill that we're on the gold standard now, and then wink, wink, nod, nod, we're actually printing more than we have gold holdings again, like we did before. What does the gold standard do? It's just this temporary stopgap to give some kind of legitimacy to the dollar again. But it doesn't actually fix the problem because we're not actually on the gold standard. We're just saying we are, wink, wink, nod, nod, like we did before 1971. Because when they came to redeem those said dollars for gold bullion, whoopsie daisy, we don't have it. Or at least we don't want to give it to you. So let's just say in a perfect world, this passes. What would actually restrict their actions to not do the exact same thing they did before, which is print more dollars than they have gold? And you might say, well, immediately people would come to redeem. Bingo. That's why they don't want the gold standard, in my humble opinion. This is one of the reasons I'm a fan uh, of gold, silver, and Bitcoin because they can't just they cannot control the actual bullion. They can kind of control the price a little bit. They can suppress it, but in the long run, like I said before, economics is reality. Holding it physically in your hand, they cannot manufacture more of that. They can suppress the price, which is good for you in a way if you're purchasing it, but they cannot ignore reality forever. And eventually, people go back to a hard currency. That's what typically happens in countries that have inflation. In countries that I've looked into, this is from Nobody Special as well, when they have hyperinflation or when they have another way of saying that, distrust in the currency, people don't want to use it anymore. The government has to have bring confidence back. And the way they do that is by backing their currency with something that's typically gold. So I think we'll eventually get there. It might not be gold. It'll be something the government can't print more of, my humble opinion. Let me know what you think. If you think this bill has a snowball chance in hell, and let's just say it passed. I'd love to know what you think in the comments, like how that would work logistically um, in today's world with all the debt we have. All right, y'all. See you on the next one. Peace.